We have another young Indian with us today, part of the Voice of the Young segment. Hello, everyone. Good to be back. Right now, we have with us Shruthi James. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Shruthi.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Mathur. Thanks for our little chat. Hi, everyone. My name is Shruthi. I'm originally from Kerala, but I work and live in Freetown, Sierra Leone on the African West Coast. Here, I've been working with a company called ARISE IIP for a little bit over a year as their ESG manager. So ESG is really environmental, social, and governance manager. And ARISE IIP is primarily an infrastructure and industrial developer, but I can also talk a little bit later on how I got into this field. As for my academic background, I have a bachelor's in economics and political science from St. Stephen's College. And soon after that, I went on to do a master in international relations and political science from the Geneva Graduate Institute in Switzerland. Really key foundational years for me because my bachelor's was quite interdisciplinary. I was really, doing sessions on micro and macroeconomics, but also political theory. You would go to a classroom and then you would analyze economic surveys and the union budget, and then you would go back and then listen to Indian politics and how the government would essentially work. So I really enjoyed that sort of interdisciplinary mix because as I was getting right out of school, I wasn't 100% sure about what exactly I wanted to, narrow down in on or what I wanted to work in on. So just taking an interdisciplinary course as opposed to a strictly research intensive or disciplinary course, it gave me that freedom to navigate what I wanted to do and what I liked better. It also helped me find connections between, two different subjects or more. Really that interconnectivity, I was really able to explore that. So that was really a really interesting experience. But soon after that, it was the peak of the COVID. I graduated from my undergraduate in the peak of the COVID in 2020, and it was naturally like an anxious time for everyone. I wasn't once again, not sure what was the next move, but I did know that I wanted to study a little bit more. I also knew that I wanted to do something that was a little bit more research intensive this time around, a little bit more disciplinary. I really wanted to zone in and focus on something. And for the final year of an undergraduate college is just really a panic zone because you really have students running around, nailing a campus placement or getting the best scholarship. So it can become a very intimidated space. It is the very definition of a rat race, and I sort of got into it myself. I was able to secure partial funding, and I decided that I could work while I was in Geneva in Switzerland on the other go to support myself. So in 2020, I moved to Geneva and I started my very disciplinary research intensive course in international relations. And it was a really great learning experience. I think it was very different from any school or undergraduate experience I had, simply because there was a lot of autonomy in the way that learning happened. You had to pick one. There were, say, 3 courses that were core and compulsory, but the rest of your learning, you could really plan it out. So that was a really interesting option. I really got to zone in on things that I found particularly more interesting. So I did things like more related to qualitative research and quantitative research methods, right? Because I really wanted also that technical skill of how to do research. So I did spend some time learning R. I did spend some time looking at ethics when you're doing surveying. So that was a really interesting experience. And then also at that time, I was also doing a couple of internships. So, and that was really, going back into learning how to finance this education. That was also really, really good experience, because what also I think essentially happens when you move out of your comfort zone is you learn to become independent in more than one way. So I was learning also really how to become independent emotionally, but also financially, academically, professionally, and so on. And in the beginning, I worked, also the fun thing about, or maybe the not so fun thing about working outside is that people often tend to have a very glamorous point of view with it, but also sometimes you do menial jobs. So two of my first jobs when I was working were like technical student assistants, which was really walking around with a couple of gadgets and fixing up things in auditoriums and for classes. Also worked as an event assistant for a while. And then I was like, this is great, but I think I also need to hone into what could help me understand what my career is supposed to be. And so I started working in the NGO and the international organization space. And this is really what I think Geneva is also known for. You really have the United Nations and every other large international organizations headquartered right next to where I was studying international relations. So this was also a really great experience. So I worked with a couple of NGOs at the time. I worked with an NGO called the Global Survivors Fund, which was working with survivors of sexual violence. Mostly in the absence of governments, they would set up some sort of interim project measures. Sometimes it would be financial aid, but sometimes it would be building a community center that survivors could use, maybe as a spot to sell products or just to convene and hang out. So that was also really a really lovely experience. It was one of my first professional experiences, working with a range of stakeholders, really liaising with board members, but also liaising with people working in parts of Latin America, but also part of Western Central Africa. Right after that, I worked in an environmental international organization called AROHA. At the time, I was supporting them on their COP27 journey. They were really advocating for loss and damages. That was a big year, and I was working as their communications intern at the time. So again, I really moved from working for in a place where we were having a lot of talk about gender and human rights, particularly women's rights, to moving on to something that was a little bit different with respect to environment and international development, and how to influence countries' policies, particularly with respect to environment. That was also really, really great learning experience, because again, there was such a great exposure to a range of stakeholders. And right around this time is when I was also finishing up my master's degree. And it was quite a bit of a hassle to work and study at the same time. It was very challenging because it required a certain level of discipline to be able to, work almost 40 hours a week, but also learn how to manage your time with your classes and, getting all the work done. But I don't think I would have it another way. It really was my first step to becoming financially independent, which I value so much now as a young adult in her 20s. But also I was really able to, I think, get what I wanted from that master's experience, which is learning how to research, really honing into my qualitative and quantitative skills. And the master's program I chose, it was really designed to help you move into a PhD program. So I really am glad that I think I have some of the skill sets in case I do want to try and see what that option could be like. I feel a little bit more equipped to begin that process. So that's also interesting. But really around the end of that program and that time is when I had the opportunity to move to Gabon with this company that I'm working with called ARISE. And they reached out to me to join in their Young Leaders program, which is essentially one of those management trainee programs where they hone you on how to manage for a year. And you sort of get rotated between departments, and you get rotated between managers, and you get rotated between different countries or different business units. And after a year of learning how to do the job, you're sort of assessed, and based on your performance and based on the availability of new positions, you could move into a different role or a little bit more of a managerial role. And so that's what I did. I was really excited. By the time I was ready to graduate, I knew that I wanted to work in development projects, but not necessarily from, I would say, a humanitarian perspective, because I had spent 2 years while I was in Geneva looking at everything from an aiding or a humanitarian assistance perspective. And as important as it is, I really wanted to explore something else. Like, there has to be another way to bring about development without it having to be all about charity in a sense. And so this company did just that. It is a private player that is trying to make large-scale impact by creating these industrial zones that are able to generate hundreds of thousands of jobs, which really then turns around, people's living standards. And also, what they also do is they try to do import substitutions rather than focusing on, having all this raw material go out and then get processed elsewhere. So I moved to Gabon last year in October, and I moved to Gabon. I was in Libreville with the ARISE team for 6 months. And then I also was able to visit Benin and Togo, 2 other West African countries, with the same company on some other projects. And finally, I've now moved to Sierra Leone. I've been here for the last 8 months. And it's been a really rewarding experience in every way, right? I mean, it often also does come with its own challenges. When I first moved to Gabon, everyone strictly spoke French. And despite... Oh, sorry, I think Mr. Mathur, I think you're on mute.
That's what I was going to ask, that all these countries are French speaking. So
Right.
how did you manage?
It was a real challenge. I think in Switzerland, I had to do a mandatory French course.
Yeah.
It wasn't real learning because it was during COVID, and our French class decided to go completely online. So I think interaction was limited. So when I first moved to Gabon, it was such a challenge because our company had a strict bilingual policy, which means you would sit in a meeting and everyone would start off in English, and somewhere in the middle you would switch to French, and then I would just sit down completely confused. But the company provided us with 100 hours of French classes. So I would sit after work one-on-one with my French professor, and I was ready to to learn. So by the end of my 100 hours, I can speak French, but it's very difficult to go over a certain level. I don't think I can explain my job in French, or talk about how I do environment and social impact assessments in French, but very conversational, very basic. I can get water, I can figure out how to move to the next street, and so on. So yeah, I think that was one of the core challenges of moving to Gabon. But otherwise, it really opened up, a whole new continent, a whole new new cultures, new traditions, new food, lots of really great food. So I think if there's one key takeaway for me from this experience is to continue to do things that are a little bit outside of my comfort zone. And also, I think another key takeaway is also to, maybe move around, especially in your first couple of years. There's always a lot of pressure on knowing exactly what you need to do. But I think it's also valuable to sort of do different kinds of roles, really see what, academically it could mean something, but on a very practical level, it could be completely different. So really
Yeah.
exploring that. And I
Yeah.
think with this traineeship as well, I think that's one of the great things that happened, because I did spend some time in their communications team with communications and marketing professionals, getting a taste of what that looks like.
Mhm.
But ultimately, I spent a larger chunk of my time with the environment and social and governance teams, and and I think it is the one of the hot topics of our time at the moment. But it's also so interesting. Just all the innovation that's happening right as we speak. So so some part of what I do in my everyday job is monitoring our environment and social management plans for the industrial zone.
Mhm.
And because it is an industrial zone, we are looking at 1,500 hectares of land, and so it
Mhm.
becomes very important to ask the questions of how is waste being disposed,
Yeah.
or what is the baseline for air quality before we started, and what happens once we begin operations. So, and it's also part of compliance. So you have to look at it from a compliance point of view, but you also have to try to find interesting, creative, innovative solutions.
Mhm.
So um, so essentially there is the compliance aspect of it that I do, but then there's also working with some of our carbon teams to map our carbon footprints, see where exactly the highest amount of emissions come from, and then to assess, okay, can we swap something here? Can we use a different technology here that would potentially reduce that impact? So that is also something that is very interesting, and it's a new field for me, considering I don't have that strictly technical environmental background. So these are all things on the job that I'm trying to learn and absorb. And I think it's also interesting I mentioned that, because also doing this and navigating new paths also means that sometimes you do feel like a little bit of an imposter. And it's funny I say that, because sometimes I feel like you're looking to apply for these early career jobs, and then you see that they're looking for like 5 years of experience, for an early career job. You're expected to be an expert by the time you're 23 or 24, but it's a really tricky situation to attain that, right? But yeah, I'm also learning how to learn on the job and be satisfied with learning on the job and growing and putting in the extra work, and to battle the imposter syndrome as and when it comes.
Well, I think everybody is an imposter.
Yeah,
The
that's
only thing
comforting.
is that the senior people have learned how to play that role better than you.
Yeah.
So nobody knows anything. All people are imposters, but they have learned uh, how to avoid mistakes mainly. That's what
Mm.
experience is about, not about how to get things done. It's really
Mm-hmm.
about how to avoid some mistakes and how to
Mm.
recover. But otherwise, people are all imposters.
Mm.
There's just no way around it. It's like
Yeah.
it's like everywhere. Okay, anyway, let's continue.
No, thanks, Dr. Mathu. That's actually quite reassuring. Um, yeah, so that is my journey as of now. And I think a couple of things that have probably really helped me in this time is, one, I would really overemphasize and say it has helped me, which is a little bit of a cliche, but I really think networking has really helped me
Mhm.
in a way that I would have not been able to imagine a couple of years before this. And
Yeah.
I, since the time I went to Stephens, I think it was drilled into my system that networking is so important. But right, like, and I think I did have my own personal philosophy around it, because for a very long time I felt like, oh, if I were to network, it feels that I am, trying to get something out of someone, or I'm being cunning, or I'm trying to do something lucrative. Whereas it really isn't that. And that's something I've learned over the time of doing it, but also having conversations around what it means to network with mentors and with senior professionals. And now I think I've learned to approach it maybe with a little bit more grace for myself, where I'm like, oh, you're having an honest conversation, and you're looking to learn something from the other person, and you're also hoping to share a little bit about yourself. And there's no harm in that. But I do say this because I think my one of the internships I mentioned about working at the environmental space, that really came from a networking experience. I was working at the Global Survivors Fund, and my contract was quickly running out, and I knew I had to find the next thing, and the office of the other company that I worked at was right next to the other office, and I would quite often interact with those in the other office, and it really came up as, oh, we have an opening. I don't know if you're interested, but we would be interested to see if you want to join the team. And even this opportunity of where I am currently working has really come in from putting a little bit effort into managing a LinkedIn account. And so I would really emphasize that it's a really powerful tool. I don't know, it reminds me of some cheesy quote that my father said to me quite recently about how your net worth is your network. But
it should be more than your net worth, should be more than your network, I think.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but I couldn't. I'm really glad to have used it in a way that that has allowed me to also provide information to other people who are perhaps looking to move to African countries. It has allowed me to provide information to those people who are looking to apply to colleges abroad, but it has also allowed me to harness other people's expertise in a particular area.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Anything else you want to add?
Finally, I think I would also just encourage people to also look at African countries as a place to work in or to move to. I think there's a lot of emphasis and focus on, moving to the West, moving to the US or to Canada or to European countries, and all for like lovely, right reasons, right? There is a certain standard and there is a certain quality of education or work life. But I would say that just in my experience of having lived in some of these countries, I would say that the stereotype is simply a stereotype, and that there is a lot of professional, private institutions working in this part of the world, but also that there is so much to learn in terms of, new cultures, new food, new ways of doing, being, thinking. So I would just essentially also encourage those of you who are interested to move to African countries. Also, I'm available if you would like to reach out. Okay, that's good. I mean, I've not been to French Africa at all, but English-speaking Africa, I've spent a long time. I traveled through rural areas of many countries, and it's difficult. There's no question about it. It's different, but cities like Nairobi, and if you go there, expat life is pretty comfortable. In the capital cities, expat life is not difficult at all. Especially, some of the places it might be difficult. But if you are in, like, Gabon's quite prosperous, right? Yeah, quite. Gabon's quite prosperous. Sierra Leone is not. Gabon's quite prosperous. So you can have, it's a very comfortable life for many people. One of my close friends lives in Abidjan, and he's not about to quit Abidjan if he can help it, because, it's a comfortable life. So yes, you can find a good job there. Okay. Absolutely. Wonderful. But how did you find this company? I mean, is it an international company or what is it? It is a Pan-African company. And really, it came to me on LinkedIn. Somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn, sent a message, and had a couple of interviews and moved into the country.
And what about visas, work visas? How does, I mean, you still have an Indian passport, I take it. So
Yes.
who handles all that?
All of the administrative stuff is handled by the organization.
Okay.
So you can really, come in easy.
Okay. And have you been back to India from Africa?
I have been back once. My parents do live in Dubai, and so I do visit them in Dubai every now and then. But I have been back to Kerala, and it's always such a treat. I can't wait. Actually, I am going back next month to visit my family for Christmas.
Okay.
I think it should be quite lovely.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm so glad to hear from you. It's a good success story to be moving to French West Africa and enjoying it. And I could never go because, as a mid-level professional, you cannot say I don't know French. It's very hard to get anything done. So I couldn't go there. But I'm glad you have enjoyed it. And what's your future?
Ooh, I do see myself here easily for another 1 or 2 years. But like I said, I am really considering what would be next in terms of an educational background. I do want to hone into, I think, sustainable management related skills a little bit more. So I am considering and debating between a PhD and an MBA.
Okay. All right. Fine.
Yeah. A lot of deliberation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. That's good. Okay. You can think. I mean, MBA is much faster than a PhD, let me tell you that. And if time is a constraint, then MBA is fast and you are done. Okay. So you can even do 1-year program. So and so you can PhD, you cannot speed up. It's just so okay. Anyway, anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I mean, it's really a pleasure to listen to you, to listen to success, and well done. Congratulations. That's what I would say. And maybe we'll catch up with you in a year to see. Maybe you'll talk to us in French. Who knows?
Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Right. All right. Okay, good. So thank you. Let's end the recording now. I'll be back with another young person or an expert soon. Till then, bye. Bye, everybody.